Welcome, everyone. I am pleased to introduce our guest today, Su-Yoon Ko. Su-Yoon is a professional organizer, a feng shui master, and elemental jewelry designer. She created her business, Decluttering Key, in order to help people with what she believes is the most important aspect of the organizing process. She believes decluttering is the key to organizing. When the things that are unused and unloved are peeled away, it's possible to manage the rest and set up organizing systems that will last. She also has a specialty in bereavement organizing, which we will focus on today. Welcome, Su-Yoon.
In 2002, I ended up going back to Korea and staying for 11 years. And it's a pretty transient community there. So there were a few of us who were there sort of long term, but people were always coming and going. And when they would leave, they would say, "Hey, we have this stuff. It's good. Do you want it?" So you're like, okay. But the spaces are quite small. Like right now, my sort of dining area in my apartment is about the size of my whole first apartment in Korea. So, I mean, it's not a lot of space. And so, 11 years later, I had a lot of stuff, good stuff from people in a very small space. And it was just so overwhelming. And a friend happened to lend me a book. Here, I have a copy called Clear Your Clutter with Feng Shui by Karen Kingston. And this absolutely changed my life, literally.
Yeah.
But it really focuses on clutter and sort of defining what different kinds of clutter are and how it's affecting you. And so, I mean, as you see, it's a very small book. So I read it really quickly, started decluttering, and could feel the energy in my apartment just change. And I was absolutely amazed. I could not stop talking about this book and decluttering to all of my friends.
Yeah.
And so I would start helping them declutter. And then, when I'd come back here to visit my grandparents, I would see them and I realized, in their kitchen, all of the stuff that they actually needed and used were really low. Then they couldn't even reach it. So I helped them sort of redo their kitchen so it was functional for them. Intellectually, we know people die. We know that. But when you're in the hospital, you realize people die every day. And a few years earlier, my cousin's husband had passed away very suddenly. And so I flew back from Korea, was there for the funeral, went back to Korea, came back about a month later, and all of his stuff was exactly the way it had been when he had died.
Yeah.
And wow, she shouldn't have to do that alone.
Yeah.
And so sort of thinking about that, being in the hospital and just realizing someone's dying every day, someone is inheriting someone else's belongings every day that they're going to have to deal with.
Yeah.
And it's our stuff on its own is difficult.
Yeah.
Like, what do I do with this piece of paper? I don't know what to do with it. But when there's grief involved, when there's memories, when it's not even yours and you're just not sure, all of that coming together just makes it a very even more complicated process. No one wanted anyone in their homes, which was completely understandable. But yeah, summer sort of on, I think we all got a little more comfortable, with the practices and have been very busy, actually. People are still moving. Life didn't stop. People are still moving and, want help decluttering and sort of organizing before that or unpacking and helping put away after. But also just, we're all in our homes so much now, all together, that we can't just sort of escape what's working and what isn't working. And so it is sort of, okay, well, and also people are sort of, offices are shutting down. So people are moving their home offices home and they're like, what? So there's just a lot of stuff to sort of figure out and deal with and know how to put together. And so,
Yeah.
it's a little of everything. Just sort of stuff is accumulating. I now see it and want to deal with it and have the time.
Yeah.
And just life transitions, moving, or we're downsizing. We're going to move, and we have all these things we want to go through and deal with before we do that. If you're feeling overwhelmed already, bringing new stuff in can be, even more overwhelming. But there's something called, I don't believe in hard and fast rules. I think there's principles, and picking from what feels good and works for you and your situation. But there's what's called the 1 in, 1 out rule. So if something comes in, something else should go out.
Yeah.
If you're trying to maintain where you are. If you're trying to reduce, then 1 in, maybe 2 out, 5 out will help you sort of
measure it.
Yep. So gifts and heirlooms, I think, kind of go together.
Yeah.
And there's a couple different ways that you can sort of approach it. And this is kind of how I work with clients as well. I feel like I have all these tools and I just sort of throw it out. If that works, great. If not, I pull out another idea that might sort of catch them, be like, oh yeah, that makes sense to me. That feels good.
Yeah.
But so one thing is, I really believe that people in general, hopefully, are giving a gift with love. So if they give the gift with love and you receive it with love, then the gift has done what it needs to do. That's the job of the gift, to be given and received.
Yeah.
And now I believe in setting up boundaries and just saying, this is where I am. This is my space. I am sort of in control of that. And that feels good to me. And so this thing, whatever it is not my aesthetic. I don't love it. It's an object. It's okay to say thank you. Thank you to the person who gave it. Thank you to the object for doing your job, and just letting it go. I also believe in destiny. People have destinies. We're here to do something. I think things have destinies as well. And if you keep that thing that you don't truly love and it sits in a box in your attic, it's not really being respected or fulfilling its destiny either. So if you let it go, someone else who truly loves that has a better chance of finding it. And then it's, again, being used and loved. And so I think, and that's happened several times with clients where they let it go and the person coming to pick it up that bought it said, I have been looking for this exact thing. And that just gives me chills. I just love that. That is how I think that should happen. I also believe, we should ideally own our belongings. And if we are keeping something out of either guilt or because we feel like we have to, then that thing is actually owning us. Mm-hmm. And so giving ourselves permission to let things go, I think is really powerful. Yeah. And also, and depending on sort of people, how they feel, but sometimes, if they're no longer of this world and you just say, hi, Grandma, is it okay if I let this go? And then just feel an answer, see an answer, hear an answer. And quite often, I think they're like, yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't that big of a deal.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, sometimes, there are people who are giving a gift that expect you to keep it. But then I also think, how loving was that gift given then? Mm-hmm. Is it about you, or is it about their ego that they gave it to you? So anyway, there is a lot to unpack, and it's just sort of don't love that don't represent you or your relationship to that person. Yeah. If you think about it, a museum, they've only displayed certain things so that we can truly see them. But if everything's out, we can't really see anything. It's too much clutter for the eye, and it's just a lot of stress and energy. Yeah. And so for quite often, it's just about finding that thing that you really do love and represents them and your relationship to them, that has a good memory, and thinking, okay, if I have this, I can let other things go because I have this favorite thing. Yeah, it's all about energy. For me, feng shui is really about protection, it's about intention, and it's about balance. And so intention has become a very important concept to me. And how do we intend to use this space? How do I intend to feel in it? And so the benefits of feng shui really are about balance. I mean, too much, everything's energy. That's one of the principles of feng shui. So that piece of paper that you think isn't really doing much, often it's energy. And if it's not being seen to, it's just sitting there. Every time you look at it, you sort of feel guilty, like, oh, I should do something with that. Oh, but later. And that's stagnant, heavy energy. And then often that energy attracts other things. And the next time you look at it, there's 20 pieces of paper on that paper. And it just, that pile grows. And so it just sort of attracts other stagnant energy. So helping set up systems, like what you're doing, but even if they're not sure what to do, having a designated place to put it is even more organized than it just sitting there causing stress.
Yeah.
But so helping, I think organization really is about everything having a home. So I have a little, it's called DEAL. Like I ask, how do you deal with your clutter? So the first one, declutter. Because I really do think decluttering is the key to organizing.
Yeah.
There's the 80-20 principle. We use about 20% of our stuff. So for me, it's helping pull out some of that 80% that we really don't use or love. So decluttering is imperative. Organizing almost happens by itself once you declutter, once you see what's actually left. Declutter, E, evaluate what's left. A, assign a home for it. Because if you know where it goes and everyone in your space know where it goes, things are more likely to stay organized. And then labeling, I think, is also very helpful. If you containerize it, it feels more organized. It'll most likely stay there. And if it's labeled, you know where it goes. Your kids know where it goes. The dog knows where it goes. And it's most likely to end up there again. So when it's needed. If someone comes to me for help, whether they have any questions or want to set up a consult or actually hire me, I let them know that I am not judgmental at all, because I know there's so much stress and anxiety and shame in all of our stuff. And so that makes it that much more difficult asking for help. Just starting. I always say it's never too early to declutter, because it is a gift. If you are doing it for your kids or for others who might have to deal with it, it is such a gift to them to have it be done. But it's also a gift for you right now, because going back to the feng shui, you feel that change of energy. You physically feel lighter when the things that you aren't using, that you aren't loving, are taken out of your space. And so I think just knowing it's not wasted time if you are starting now. And that once you get started, it's actually that energy is really quite infectious. When you realize, why do I have this? Yeah, I don't need this. And another concept of energy is sort of, in order for new energy to come in, you kind of need to have room for it. So if your bookshelf is full, you don't have room for other books. But if you aren't going to read these books again, you got what you needed from this book. If you let it go, you have room for new books and new energy to come in.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, just sort of, well, this sort of brought me to the end of life work, but I'm a firm believer in just sort of acknowledging we're going to die. We're not going to live forever. It's not, it's just a fact of life. And being able to acknowledge that, how do I want to spend this time in between? Do I want to read this book? No. I would rather read this book, or I'd rather play that game, or I'd rather see that movie. Great, let that go.
Yeah.
Acknowledging how much time we have and where we are right now. Like this book, I loved it. I keep going back to books. I loved it, but I that was when I was in my, teens. Do I need that anymore? I'm not in my teens anymore. I want ideally my stuff to represent sort of where I am right now and the favorites from the past, the highlights. But if there's anything that has, negative memories or is broken, or those are easy places to start, to just say, do I need this here? And once you start letting some of those go, I think people will be surprised just how lightning and freeing that is. I am a fan of the maybe box. And so it's exactly those things where you don't hate it, but don't love it or don't use it. So have a box, put all those things in it, tape it up, put it in the closet, in your calendar or electronic calendar, maybe a month or 2 months or however many months, whatever time you choose later, say check maybe box. And if you haven't gone to look for anything in it, if you don't remember what you put in it, then maybe it's okay to just let it go.
Yeah.
Is to just not even open it, but just drop it right off that donation. Yeah.
Our are donations okay now? There was a time where everything was closed and you couldn't.
Everything's pretty much open right now. Maybe limited hours, but yeah, pretty much everything's open these days. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say the other thing that I would, if a client is really stumped by something, is I would just ask a lot of questions about it. I ask so many questions.
Yeah.
I don't know. You seem to not know, but if I ask questions, it gets closer and closer underneath. And quite often people are like, oh, that's why. Okay, I know what to do with it. And or even a few minutes later, I suggest if you don't necessarily need it or use it, what if you take a picture to remember it? And they're like, I don't know. And then we move on to something else. And then quite often they're like, yeah, never mind, declutter, donate. Sometimes it can happen that quickly within minutes.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's the next session I go back and they're like, oh yeah, I don't know why I kept that. Yeah.